I want you to imagine something with me for a second. Let's fast forward exactly 1 decade into the future.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So you wake up, and AI isn't just a tool you log into anymore. It is, well, it's the invisible architecture of your entire day.
Like it just anticipates your schedule before you even get out of bed.
Exactly. It's drafting your correspondence before you've even poured your coffee. It's resolving complex logistical nightmares in the background, without you ever lifting a finger.
Tasks that used to demand hours of really grueling, deeply focused work.
Yeah, they just happen invisibly. Complex strategic decisions that once required entire committees, massive whiteboards, weeks of debate, they are executed instantly through a single, perfectly calibrated prompt.
Right, which sounds incredible on the surface.
It does. In this world, efficiency is no longer some competitive advantage you strive for. Efficiency is just the baseline. It's the absolute floor of human existence. But looking at the stack of research and essays we are diving into today, this incredibly seamless, frictionless future raises a deeply uncomfortable question. As the artificial intelligence gets infinitely stronger, are we getting cognitively weaker?
And we aren't talking about physical atrophy here, right? We're talking about the actual decay of the biological hardware in our heads.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So the mission for today's deep dive is to figure out how you can harness this unbelievable computational power without accidentally outsourcing the very mechanisms that make you a thinking, feeling human being.
It's a huge challenge
Mm.
because neuroplasticity dictates that the human brain optimizes for whatever it does most often. If it stops bearing cognitive weight, it literally sheds the neural pathways required to lift it.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this. Because when I was reading through the author's notes on this whole concept of cognitive offloading, a very specific comparison came to mind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we all lived through the transition to GPS navigation, right? Before smartphones, navigating a new city required an internal cognitive map.
You had to actually look out the window.
Right, you had to pay attention to landmarks, gauge distances, build a spatial understanding of your environment. And then, well, we handed that job over to a little blue dot on a screen.
And the result was pretty immediate.
Our natural sense of direction just evaporated. I mean, neuroscientists have actually shown that when we blindly follow turn-by-turn directions, the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for spatial navigation, literally doesn't engage. So are we about to do the exact same thing to our prefrontal cortex with AI?
That spatial mapping analogy holds a lot of weight, honestly, because it really illustrates the difference between having a tool and becoming dependent on an exoskeleton.
An exoskeleton, right.
Yeah, when you use an exoskeleton to walk, your own muscles degrade. What's fascinating here is the economic data backing up the urgency of this cognitive preservation.
Tell me about that, because the source dives into some really surprising projections.
Right, the source references the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs analysis. They looked ahead to 2030 to predict what the global economy will actually value.
And you would naturally assume, in an AI-dominated landscape, the most critical skills would be deeply technical.
Exactly. Advanced coding, machine learning architecture, data science.
It feels completely counterintuitive to think otherwise. I mean, if the machines run everything, you need to be the person who programs the machines, right?
But the labor market economics suggests something entirely different. As technical execution becomes commoditized, those skills actually drop in relative value.
Commoditized meaning AI can just write the code and parse the data at near zero marginal cost.
Exactly. The skills rising to the absolute top of the WFEF projections aren't technical at all. They are critical thinking, creative thinking, and complex emotional social skills.
Things like empathy, active listening.
Navigating ambiguity, social influence. The machine provides the statistical processing, but the human provides the judgment, the aesthetic taste, and the relational connection.
It's the ultimate irony of the automation age. The skills most at risk of atrophy, because we're so tempted to let the algorithm handle the heavy lifting, are precisely the deeply human abilities that will be the most scarce.
And therefore the most valuable by 2030. If we allow our biological processors to degrade by constantly deferring to the algorithm, we're essentially making ourselves obsolete.
Obsolete in the only arenas where human capital still commands a premium. So, to understand how to fix this, we first need to understand exactly how these skills fade.
Right, because it's not a dramatic overnight loss of intelligence.
No, it's quiet. It's subtle. The author points out that this cognitive erosion happens in the background while you're busy celebrating how much time you just saved on a Tuesday afternoon.
The illusion of productivity basically masks the loss of capability.
Exactly. And to understand how this works, we should look at how the source defines critical thinking. It strips away all the academic jargon.
Yeah, the source defines it simply as thinking smart, not fast, checking facts, questioning assumptions, and choosing wisely.
Right. And behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman talk about System 1 and System 2 thinking, which is super relevant here.
Definitely. System 1 is fast, intuitive, automatic. System 2 is slow, effortful, analytical.
And AI is essentially a supercharger for System 1. It provides these immediate, polished answers that feel incredibly satisfying to our fast-thinking brain.
It completely short-circuits the need to engage System 2.
Yeah.
We're being neurologically conditioned to expect instant turnarounds.
Yeah, and the danger isn't AI replacing our thinking like some sci-fi movie. It's that speed tricks us into believing we are thinking.
When we're merely accepting a confident-sounding output, the speed gives us the dopamine hit of task completion without the metabolic cost of actual thought.
And the output looks so authoritative, right? It arrives in 3 seconds, perfectly formatted bullet points, grammatically flawless.
Carrying a tone of absolute certainty.
Yes, you read it, your brain registers the aesthetic polish as factual competence, and you just move on.
You tell yourself you just did some rigorous strategy work.
But you didn't. You didn't wrestle with the variables. You didn't challenge the internal logic. You just accepted it because it offered no resistance.
You abandon the muscle of skepticism. When an answer is presented with that level of frictionless confidence, you just stop looking for the hidden flaws.
Which bleeds heavily into how we approach creativity. The essay makes this profound point about creativity thriving on friction.
The wrestling with ideas, the exploration of the unknown.
Yeah, but let me push back on this for a second. Let me pose a direct question to you. Because if AI can give us 10 ideas instantly, without any friction, isn't that a good thing for brainstorming?
Well, it feels like a good thing.
I mean, why do we need the struggle? In a
Yeah.
corporate environment, getting 10 pretty good concepts right away beats spending an hour staring at a blank screen.
You're hitting on the central tension of modern knowledge work there. AI absolutely obliterates the bottleneck of generating raw volume, but we have to look at how large language models actually function.
Yeah, they're predictive engines.
Exactly. They map the vast vector space of human language and calculate the statistically most probable sequence of words. By definition, they generate the mean.
They give you the consensus, not the breakthrough.
Yes, they produce the average of what has already been thought. So without the struggle, we stop pushing ourselves to imagine unexpected connections.
Because the algorithm avoids the improbable.
Right. When you wrestle with a problem, your brain searches for the adjacent possible. The algorithm avoids that. So without that struggle, your work loses its unique signature. It just becomes empty mental calories.
You essentially settle for a highly polished baseline. The AI provides the mean, but humans have to provide the variance.
And that variance is where all the actual value lies. And we can actually link this loss of creative friction directly to emotional intelligence, or EQ.
Oh, wow, really? How so?
Well, just as cognitive breakthroughs require wrestling with ideas, EQ is built through human interaction. And human interaction inherently includes the discomfort of conflict.
Navigating awkwardness, interpreting shifting tones.
Exactly. Authentic relationships have inherent friction. But the technology we use every day is explicitly designed to be frictionless.
It accommodates everything we ask without judgment.
Right, and that leads directly to the danger zone the author realized they were falling into. To keep using these tools without losing their cognitive agency, they had to actively engineer resistance back into their workflow.
They had to get back in the driver's seat.
Exactly, building habits to preserve those critical skills.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the author lays out some very practical solutions. The first tip is to pause for 30 seconds before prompting.
Just have a minute to sit with a blank screen.
Yeah, and ask yourself, what do I already know? What are my assumptions? And most importantly, why am I turning to AI right now? Is it a lack of knowledge, a lack of time, or am I just avoiding deep thinking?
That is such a vital piece of self-inquiry, because realizing you lack domain knowledge isn't a flaw. It's actually an invitation to learn, so you don't outsource that skill forever.
If you realize you're asking the AI because you fundamentally don't understand the system, you can choose to actually study it.
Right, you build the mental scaffolding yourself, rather than just devolving into a simple machine operator.
Which brings us to tips 2 and 3. Always asking AI why and what else. Essentially treating it like a smart intern rather than an oracle.
You manage the output instead of submitting to it. If the intern hands you a strategy, you don't just copy-paste it.
You interrogate it. You ask it to defend its logic. And the author also talks about doing a manual pass, like creating your own rough outline before you even open the AI.
Because structuring raw information into a cohesive narrative is the heaviest lifting in human cognition. It's where the critical muscle is exercised.
Oh, wait, let me play devil's advocate again. If I have to sketch my own rough outline and do the hard thinking first, doesn't that kill the sheer efficiency that makes AI so great in the first place?
It's a fair question, but you have to separate physical labor from cognitive labor. Think of the AI as a forklift.
Okay, a forklift.
A forklift is incredible for lifting a heavy pallet, but you, the operator, still have to decide where the warehouse is going to be built and where that pallet needs to go.
If you let the machine decide the destination, you aren't managing the tool anymore.
Exactly. Doing that manual pass sacrifices short-term speed, sure, but it prevents the long-term compounding cost of losing your ability to synthesize information. AI should elevate your foundational work, not replace the thinking that makes the work uniquely yours.
The conception remains human. The efficiency comes in the execution, expanding the prose, formatting the data.
Right. And maintaining that human core becomes infinitely more critical when we shift away from intellectual productivity and examine the psychological impact of these tools.
This transitions into something much more intimate from the source: how AI affects our emotional regulation and our real-world relationships.
Yeah, this part is fascinating.
It centers on tip 4, and it points out a surprisingly creepy detail. AI is overwhelmingly supportive.
Unless you explicitly prompt it to be critical, the system is fundamentally engineered to please you.
It validates your premises, agrees with your frustrations. It's like having a friend who never tells you when you have spinach in your teeth.
Right, they just smile and nod to avoid the awkwardness.
Exactly. So if we get used to this constant, perfect, positive affirmation from AI, are we wiring ourselves to expect that from real people? Will human connections start to feel too difficult or like the weaker option?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are talking about the degradation of the psychological immune system. Relying on AI for emotional validation risks our resilience.
Because real humans have bad days. They challenge your ideas.
Yes, and if your nervous system is conditioned in a frictionless digital environment, your tolerance for real-world conflict drops to zero. The real EQ work is pausing to ask why you feel a certain way before asking AI to help.
Processing reality without a digital safety net, which is why tip 5 is so crucial: creating boundaries. Keeping a human-only or human-predominant zone.
A deliberate quarantine for the algorithm.
Right, for activities like morning journaling, reading physical books, or high-level strategy thinking, you guarantee you still have an arena where you process the world entirely on your own terms.
Complete with all the necessary struggle and depth.
And that brings us to tip 6, which is the ultimate yardstick for authentic thought. Using AI as a thought partner to stretch, not shrink, your thinking.
Twisting it, challenging it, injecting your own nuance.
And the source shares this brilliant yardstick to measure your success. You constantly ask yourself, do I genuinely like the AI's response?
This raises an important question about our internal compass. Because if you find yourself constantly nodding along, agreeing with every single output, that is a massive red flag.
You've surrendered. You're adopting its statistical average as your own personal baseline.
Exactly. Your internal taste has gone dormant. The profound realization the author shares is that catching yourself thinking, nope, that's not it, this doesn't sound like me, is actually a moment of triumph.
Feeling disappointed by the algorithm is a massive victory.
It really is. It means your judgment is intact, your voice hasn't gone quiet, and you are still thinking for yourself. You're holding the output up against your own rigorous internal yardstick.
So, bringing it all together for you, the listener, as we look back at that 10-year horizon we imagined at the start, the future doesn't belong to the fastest thinkers.
The silicon has already won the race for speed.
Right. It belongs to the smartest, most creative, and most emotionally grounded humans. We have to use AI as an amplifier, not a replacement. So what does this all mean?
It means the question isn't whether AI will change us, but whether we stay intentional about who we become in the process.
Exactly.
And I'll leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder. If AI eventually generates all the perfect corporate logic and flawless communication, providing an endless stream of frictionless ideas, will unassisted, slightly flawed, uniquely human thought become a premium luxury commodity?
Wow, that's a great question.
10 years from now, will employers or audiences actually value the messy friction of a human mind more than the instant perfection of an AI?
When perfection is free and instantaneous, the only thing left of value is authenticity. That is a brilliant and necessary question to chew on as you navigate the tools in front of you today. Thank you so much for joining this deep dive. Keep your mental muscles sharp, keep your internal compass active, and we will see you next time.